Dear friends, welcome to this latest episode of the podcast series, The Way Out is In. I am Jo Confino, working at the intersection of personal transformation and systems evolution.
And I'm Brother Phap Huu, a Zen Buddhist monk, student of Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh in the Plum Village tradition.
And today, dear listeners, we are going to talk about how to handle our pain. And we know that actually we have our individual pain, so we have our suffering, but also we have collective pain. And one of the most important things is to know how to handle that, how to be aware of it, to understand it, and then to be able to start transforming it. And Brother Phap Huu has 8 stages for how we are able to be with our pain.
The way out is in.
Dear listeners, I'm Jo Confino.
And I'm Brother Phap Huu.
And Brother Phap Huu, we are sitting in the Sitting Still hut of Thich Nhat Hanh during the summer retreat in Plum Village. The door is open because it's quite warm today. And so we may hear the sound of children running around and screaming, which means that they're having a good time. If there's complete silence, we would worry about them. So, dear listeners, if you hear any sounds in the background, it's not children running scared, it's children running free. Brother Phap Huu, pain, what a joyous subject. What a lovely thing to discuss on an afternoon. We all suffer from pain. We all sometimes feel overwhelmed by pain. Often we don't know how to handle it. So this is an important area of practice. And the Plum Village tradition has been looking at pain, and of course through Buddhism for 2,600 years, has been exploring the mind. And one key aspect is suffering. So tell us, what do we mean by pain? First of all, let's just open up. What do we mean by pain?
I think pain is a universal thread that connects all of us human beings, because it is inevitable that each and every one of us experience pain. Whether it is physical, whether it is emotional, and part of the Buddha's journey in understanding his spiritual investigation was how can he touch deep freedom and deep awakening. And that is the path that helped him inquire and then give up everything he had in order to commit his whole being into exploring a way to understand suffering. And so when we speak about pain, we speak about suffering. And we know in the teachings of Buddhism, suffering is a noble truth. It is the first noble truth of Buddhism. And this lets us know that if we have an opportunity to look at suffering with the eyes and the lens of mindfulness, we have a big opportunity. And this opportunity is that we can learn from our suffering. We can even learn from our pain. And in our times, and I wouldn't even just say it's our modern time, but I would say like many, many lifetimes, many generations, we have the fear of being with suffering. We have the fear of being with pain. And because of this fear and because of this this habit of avoiding pain, we have created many, many pathways to run away from it. And in our modern times, we have devices, we have consumerism, we have eating, we have doing, like almost like every activity that we can experience in a way it is to run away from the pain and the suffering. And because sometimes we don't have the insight in knowing how to be with the pain and the suffering, therefore, we continue this cycle of running and this cycle of avoiding. And the Buddha and our teacher, Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh, who we refer as Thai, has explained that there is goodness in suffering. And it's if we know how to look deeply into suffering, we will know how to suffer. And the key is we know how to be with pain, we know how to embrace pain, and we know how to transform pain. We know how to heal pain. And so I think this is a wonderful topic that we can explore today, because I think it is a deep aspiration for all of us in having the ability, whether we call it tools or skill sets, or in our language, we have a practice to be with pain.
And brother, just to be clear, when the aim is not to eradicate pain. And the reason I say that is because a lot of people think that actually transforming pain is eradicating it for life, that actually then you can be happy. But one of the things during the research when we were writing our book, Being with Business, which comes out later this year, is that Thai wrote a letter to the monastics talking about, that the Buddha suffered throughout his life, that he was nearly assassinated a few times, or assassination attempts against him, that his old kingdom was invaded by an evil king and taken over, and that Thai himself, during the Vietnam War, had suffered immensely. And he said, actually, the suffering is a way to actually understand ourselves and to find a pathway through. So can you just talk about that we're not trying to say no more pain ever?
If we think about it, it's impossible. It really is impossible to eradicate, to erase pain and suffering. And our teacher speaks on this in a very loving way, because sometimes we have a notion we are religious or we practice spirituality in order to arrive maybe in our next life or after death to, in Buddhism, this notion of the Pure Land of the Buddha, or in Christianity, the kingdom of God. And we may think that destination where we will come to is a place where there is no suffering and there's no pain. And that is a notion, that is a view. And I just remember Thai teaching us that I would never want to send my student to a place where there is no pain and no suffering. Because if I send my student to this location, this destination, my students will never have the opportunity to learn and to grow as a human being. So pain and happiness are two pairs, or we can say suffering and happiness are two pairs in Buddhism, where the Buddha emphasizes his teaching directly to the two at the same time, not one instead of the other. But when we speak on suffering, we have to see it coexisting with happiness. And when we are taking care of our happiness, we are also taking care of our pain and our suffering. And these two pairs, they coexist. They are like light and darkness, up and down, like all the pairs of opposites. So these two fundamental elements in life are very important element of our ingredient in spirituality. So Thai has an approach that he looks at, he gives the image like a rose. When a rose blossom is beautiful, it offers its freshness, its colors, its fragrance. But the rose also has the nature of impermanent. and the rose will turn into compost. But a practitioner is not afraid when the rose is not fresh anymore and the rose is not there anymore, because it knows that the rose returns back to the earth and nourishes the earth, which generates more roses. So our relationship to pain and suffering and pain and happiness as a meditator, we see it in a very different light. And so already understanding that pain and suffering is a very important element of spiritual growth, or as a growth as a human being in general, we can start to remove some layers of our views towards suffering. And Tai always explains it also like, if we have experienced hunger, we will know the value of food. And so if we've never experienced being hungry, sometimes Tai would instruct us to practice fasting at least once a year, for example, in order to know the difference of having something in front of us. And something even more stronger, Tai would say, is sometimes we don't value peace because we live in peace. But for someone like Tai who has experienced war, he will never take a peaceful day for granted. And that becomes a root of insight in his understanding, because he's gone through so much suffering, so much despair, so much killing, that the peace that he is able to experience in 24 hours, this is the greatest gift. So it offers deep perspective to understanding, and understanding is one of the fruits of meditation. It is insight, it is enlightenment. So when we can touch our own pain and our own suffering, that is mindfulness already. Just knowing that we suffer. And how many of us suffer without knowing we suffer? And we create more suffering. And we indulge ourselves also in suffering. We can also become attached to suffering. We can identify with a suffering. And when we practice meditation, the first wing in meditation is stopping, to slow down, to allow our mind to be still so it can reflect, and so that you as an individual can see clearly why there is pain. And the second noble truth in Buddhism that the Buddha has offered us, it is the root of our pain, the root of our suffering. And this is very important because the Buddha and Tai has emphasized that everything needs food to survive. So when we suffer, it is because it is being nourished. So we have to have the ability to look deeply, to see where our way of living is it that we are cultivating this suffering. So when we start to have a relationship with our pain, with our suffering, a way out starts to appear in front of us.
Thank you, brother. And one thing before we get into the 8 steps, although of course we're already entering those, is that you talked about the fact that people get caught in their suffering, but also people get caught in their happiness, which itself creates suffering. Because if we're trying to avoid suffering and just chase after our happiness, whether that's through sex, fame, whatever, then actually that also leads to suffering. So one of the things I love about Buddhism is this idea of the middle way, which you're talking about, which is actually neither extreme work. To just go after our suffering is we're going to suffer even more, and just to go after our happiness will lead to suffering. So actually the path is to be with our suffering in order to generate happiness. But let's go to these 8 steps, because I know that in Buddhism, everything has a number. So there's the 3 doors of liberation. There's the 4 Dharma seals of Plum Village. I think, is it 84,000 Dharma doors or 87,000?
Sounds about right.
Sounds about right. Well, it's lots of them. So do you want to sort of introduce us to how, first of all, why is it helpful to have a number of steps? And how did you come up, or how did Plum Village come up with these 8 steps?
So a part of teaching, it's always helpful to put things into bucket in order to start to break it down. It's kind of like sometimes when we just talk about suffering or be with your pain, that's very general, and it's important to have the ability to articulate it and to just see it as a pathway. But like in all Buddhist teaching, don't be caught by step 1. You may touch step 3, and then you're able to understand step 1. And these 8 were actually spoken recently in a retreat that we were doing in South America. And Sister True Dedication, in her teaching, her responsibility was to continue from my talk, which was I talked about the first 4 exercises of mindful breathing, which is recognizing our breath, and then following our breath, developing our concentration, and then being aware of our body, and then releasing the tension in our body. And then the next set of 4 from the Buddha's time, it is cultivating joy and cultivating happiness. So I just want to speak very slightly here, because we've done a whole 2 episode of a podcast on the 16 exercises of mindful breathing. So not to go too much into it, but we can even see 2,600 years ago, the Buddha was already very intelligent in his teaching, like a doctor. Like before you go into surgery, before you go into the pain and the injury of the body, you have to make sure you're healthy enough. You got to be strong enough, right? Like before we get into surgery, we meet a few doctors. There's a few steps before we arrive there. And one of it is like they had to check how well are we? Are we able to go under the knife, for example? So the Buddha had that insight. So before we tap into suffering, the Buddha teaches us and tells us the importance of having the capacity to generate joy and cultivate happiness. And it is not something that you can spiritually bypass. And I know a lot of us, when we listen to the word joy and happiness, we may have a reaction. We may think, oh, that's so superficial, or, oh, joy, happiness is something like, skipping down the road, or just like doing something that is not important. And when we think about spirituality, it's like, let's talk about pain. Let's talk about suffering. Let's talk about enlightenment, and so on and so on. But as a practitioner myself, I can share with all of us the deep responsibility we have to have as an individual and a collective to have the ability to touch joy and happiness in our daily life. And Thich in his renewing Buddhism and his way of teaching, he brings it really down to earth. That joy and happiness is not something that is far in the future, which all of our advertisement tells us, invest here and you will receive this, put all your effort in this path and you will get this position, and so on. And that comes back, it plays on our fear of not enoughness. And so therefore we're chasing something in the distant. But when we talk about joy and happiness, Thich speaks about these 2 elements, present moment centered. Meaning in this moment, just coming back to your body, knowing that you have eyes that can see, that is joy. Having lungs that can breathe in air, there's no difficulty, that is deep happiness. Having two legs that are healthy, that we can imprint our footstep on earth. We can feel the sand under our toes. We can hug a tree. We can hug a loved one. We can enjoy the taste of a tangerine. That is deep happiness. And so these two steps before we arrive at pain, we have to really identify as a practitioner, is that balance, the middle way that you have mentioned. So as a practitioner, we have to be able to see that we are not forgetting nourishing an important element in our daily life, which is having the ability to experience joy in the present moment, and then recognizing happiness in the present moment.
And brother, it seems important to mention, although it's obvious, that we don't just do this for ourselves. It's an individual act, but towards a collective service. Because actually, there is a lot of pain in the world. A lot of people don't know how to handle it. And so if we're able to bring more joy and happiness and be able to transform our own pain, we are actually generating that in the world. It's like throwing a stone in a water. It will create ripples throughout and continue and affect lots of other people. So I think one of the ways that I think helps people to have the courage to step forward is to know that they do it for themselves, they do it for their family, for their friends, for their community. It's not an individual effort.
Exactly. So now
We're gonna go down. Buckle up, everyone. We're heading down.
Let's dive a little bit deep into into our favorite subject, suffering.
Yay!
It is a very important step, and I'm very happy that I can laugh about suffering, because humor is good sometimes to embrace a difficult theme. As Sister True Dedication was teaching on step 7 and 8, which is being aware of our feelings, our emotion. And then the 8th step is caring for our emotion and our pain. And then from here, she said, let's go into Buddhism Being with Pain 101. So I don't know the exact source, like what list it is in, but of course, being in Plum Village since 2001, all of these steps, I've heard Thai speak about it through his teaching career. And it's always wonderful to have smart and brainy siblings and those who like record everything and write everything down, take note, and then represent it in a very clear process. So step number 1.
Yay, here we go.
Step number 1 is mindfulness. And it is just having the ability to recognize that there is pain. And I like how she wrote it. She said, there is pain here. And this is just like how we practice recognizing, we have an in-breath, we have an out-breath. So already with this cultivation of our awareness, which is mindfulness, when pain arises, we can call it, we can see it, we can feel it, and we say, pain, you are here. And I'm not going to run towards the refrigerator to eat and cover it up. I'm not going to, run toward social media and start doom scrolling. So it's really an act of courage. And then, which leads to the second step, which is naming the pain. So pain is an umbrella. But as a practitioner, we can have the ability to name the pain, to identify it, to call it by its name. And we may start to see like a ripple effect. It's just like maybe when I'm angry, for example. Anger didn't just arise from one emotion. Anger also, before it even came to anger in me, maybe fear was there. And then hurt was there. So by naming it, you can go deep into identifying how the evolution of the present moment pain is present. So this is a step of looking deeply. The second noble truth is seeing it, recognizing it, and even seeing some of the source of it already.
So, brother, I just want to stop there for a moment, because that sounds so obvious on one level, but it's actually a revolutionary act. Because most people, when pain arises, they think they are pain. And there's an automatic sense of that's who I am, that's my nature. And there's no sense of being able to put your arms around it and sort of understand it. It's just basically people think immediately, without a think, they don't even think it. They just feel that they're right, that it's who they are, and the other person is wrong. So the sense of stopping and naming it and then seeing the source of it is such, I mean, I know it's very easy just to say it, but it's such a powerful effect, because it immediately shows us that we actually have to take some responsibility for it, rather than just painting it on the other person or on the society or whatever, that we have to actually start to take responsibility and then accountability.
And what you mentioned, that you're not just pain, is very important. And I remember coming to Plum Village as a teenager before being a monk, and Thai would give talks, and he knows that there are teenagers within the audience. And I'll never forget this one time. It was like this voice and this power that Thai had in his way of saying it. He said, "And dear young ones, please remember you are more than your emotions." So not to die because of one emotion, not to give up life because of one emotion and because of pain. And Thai speaks on it also, giving the insight of impermanence. Pain comes and goes. Our emotions arises like a storm, but it also has the nature of impermanent. It will pass by. So this is very important, because sometimes when we are being overwhelmed by one feeling, we can become totally imprisoned by it, and we know we can become numb by it. So this is why the third step is so important, and it is, where is it in my body? Where is this pain in my body? Where is this feeling in my body? Where is this emotion? Because we, as a practitioner, we know that there is an interrelationship between mind and body. And we cannot really remove the two. But when we really practice, we see the interbeing thread, how it plays out, how it pans out. So each and every one of us as a practitioner, we can start to practice step number 3 and 4 in the 16 exercises of mindful breathing, is having a relationship with our body, a real relationship, like really knowing our body. For example, I know when I'm tense, my jaw gets really tight. And I know when I have a lot of stress, my hands can cramp, like my fingers, like my My palms can even cramp up. So you start to identify where the reactions of your body manifest with particular feelings and emotion. So this is a wonderful exercise in meditation. And this is why the practice of body scan is not basic. It's fundamental, because in the most intense moments in your daily life, when all these emotions arises, whether we are in a meeting, whether we just received an information of the world or of our child, of our community, our body will react. And so to really know where is it in my body is very important.
And brother, just related to that, so I want to speak up for people who feel disassociated from their body, because that's, I felt for a lot of my life that I didn't connect with my body. I was much more in my head. So I sometimes find it quite difficult when an emotion comes up to sense it in my body, to place it. Sometimes it's obvious, but sometimes I don't feel very much. It's not very clear. So you mentioned about a body scan, so maybe that to talk more about that. But what are there ways that you can advise people that if they hear that and they say, well, that sounds great, but I find that difficult, of how do we start to train our mind to connect to our body and train our body to connect to our mind?
I would physically have a practice, especially when my mind is very overwhelmed. I would hold like a hot cup of tea. So the feeling, I'm not staying in the realm of thinking. I enter into the realm of feeling. And most of our practice, actually, we say, don't think about your breath. Feel your breath. Don't think about your body. Feel your body. But what can help us direct it even more, holding a cup of tea or a hot cup of coffee or a hot cup of warm water, a hot cup of hot water or a hot cup of chocolate milk, just anything to just guide us so that we can have a sense of feeling. And another practice that I do is I visualize my palm of my hand like my mindfulness, and with a lot of tenderness, a lot of care, and I would place it where there is a lot of pain in my body. So for example, I used to have a lot of injuries in my knee, and sometimes from sitting meditation, I cannot sit for too long. After 20 minutes, there's just excruciating pain. So when I undo the legs, all of this tension and pain are still there. I would use my hand as my mindfulness and tenderness, and I would place it on my body. And so my mind associate directly with the palm of my hand. And this is just one example. So we start to have a relationship very directly with a sense of connecting to our body. And I remember one brother still practices it today. Every time there's a very intense subject, whether it's in Dharma sharing or it is in meetings, and it's a subject that is hard to listen to, he would put his hand in his heart. So it's something very practical. It's like your bell of mindfulness. So you want to be with this sensation. So then it leads to step number 4, which is the third one is where is it in our body? And the fourth one is embracing it. So just like recognizing it, and then you bring your mind of tenderness. I like the word tenderness in this moment, and to visualize like the pain as your little child that needs your attention. And when it's a little child that is you, instead of wanting to punish it and wanting to push it away, just embracing it and just knowing it that it is here. And our practice is not to cut it off, like you mentioned, but to see that it is a part of you. And this is connected to the understanding in Buddhist psychology where we have 51 mental formations. And this is a formation that is arising. And this formation is present and we can embrace it. This is step number 4. Just knowing that it's there. The tendency to push it away can be very strong. And we can even recognize that feeling of wanting to run away. And we befriend it and we say, in this moment, let's embrace it a little bit. And then we want to ground it. So the 5th step is to breathe with it. So just like giving it a bath of your mindfulness, your attention to it. And our teacher always beautifully explains this in Dhamma talks when there is a strong emotion that arises. It's like you're holding a baby child in your 2 arms. And instead of punishing it, you're cradling it. And you are beautifully holding it with tenderness, with care. And in this moment, there is a deep practice that is happening that you're offering yourself love. You're just being attentive to yourself. You are being kind to yourself. And so you embrace this pain. You breathe with it. And another step that is related to step number 5, when we are one with it, we may like to also take refuge in nature or in a walk. So we want to see ourselves allowing this feeling to be with us, and we're like accompanying it. And our teacher always gives advice, like especially when there's a very strong emotion, don't practice sitting meditation. Because when you're doing sitting meditation and you're just allowing the storm to brew up and it's overwhelming, what we can be doing is we're adding more ingredient to it. We may be adding more stories to it. We may be adding more thinking towards it. And the Buddha calls this, we're adding arrow number 2, arrow number 3, arrow number 4. And what that means is the Buddha said, when there is pain, instead of learning to skillfully remove the arrow, we're adding more arrows by our judgment, our perceptions, and we get carried away by our mind in it. And this makes the pain more excruciating. So embracing and being with it. So whether it is through our breathing, whether through our walking, or just like laying down and just like letting that pain also be rooted in the earth.
Can I just stop you there for a moment, brother, because this is such an important point. In my experience, and I see it in my everyday life, in my coaching practice, people berate themselves when they feel pain. They actually they use it as an excuse to beat themselves up. And even yesterday I was talking to someone in Plum Village, and they had made a decision in their life that has not worked out. And you could just see that the energy was not kind, but it was self-flagellating. She said, I made a mistake. I was stupid. I should have realized. I did this. I did, and you just realize that what that does is it just keeps people away from any possibility of healing, because not only and this is the perfect example of the second arrow, not only did they feel they got it wrong, but then they beat themselves up for getting it wrong. And I feel that when I coach people, actually and you use the word tenderness a lot, and I think it's such a fabulous and underused word, because I think that what I offer often people is just tenderness, just to help them to touch the wisdom in themselves. Because when people make a mistake and then they berate themselves, they cut themselves off from any self-compassion. And when they're able to actually stop and to embrace, what they realize is they have the capacity for their own healing. It's within them. It's not like they go off and buy a self-help book, or they go and listen to a podcast or whatever. This one's fabulous. But actually, we all have within us the capacity. But in order to touch that capacity, we have to let go of this self-attack. And people have it so much.
Yes, because by doing this, what you just explained here, will also help transforming a collective consciousness. And a part of our collective consciousness, there's so much violence that have been passed down from generation to generation. Violence in household, violence within schools, violence within work communities, and then violence in nations, wars, and so on. And so we follow that pathway much more easier than being kind. It really is a very intentional practice that we have to gravitate towards, where it's very funny, where it's very easy to be unkind to oneself and very mean to oneself. So in this practice already, when you are being with pain, you are already also transforming ancestral trauma, ancestral habits, and ways of being. So this is deep Buddhism. And being with pain is not something that is just for oneself. And we always have to have that wisdom of interbeing in all of our practices.
So just related to that, often when people feel pain, they withdraw. They actually feel that they have to hide away, and that they feel embarrassed or humiliated or feeling a sense of failure. And one of the sort of, in a sense, one of the greatest assets of Plum Village is community, and the sense of, sharing one's pain is a deep practice of, if you find someone that you can trust to share one's pain, allows a release. And when we're holding it all in our bodies and minds and aren't able to release it, it's so tight. And just the way of expressing it is a release. And actually it's like a pressure cooker. When we start to let the steam out, actually everything starts to relax.
And these two steps, step 4 and step 5, another word that just manifested in my mind is we're accepting that we have pain. Yeah. How many of us suffer and go, no, I'm too good for this. I can't be suffering. I'm Jo Confino. I've been a journalist for 30-something years. I have all this insight. How dare you tell me that I suffer? Or I'm Brother Phap Huu. 20 years of practice. How can I be suffering? And that becomes a blockage to our own reality. So this step of accepting, embracing, being with it, it is an acceptance that I have pain. And it is okay. It is totally normal.
And then we have the humility for other people to face pain, because if we block it ourselves, actually we block it in allowing other people to be in their pain.
And this step, I really encourage us to really be one with the body too, because when we're in fear, you can see your body like hiding yourself, like hunching over. And so our body language, we can support our body language to be with the pain. And this is where in our modern time there's so much tension in the body. It's because we don't know how to be in our body, and we are tensing up with all of these emotions and all of these feelings and all of this suffering that is present. So this in this retreat in the summer, in the first talk that I offered, like I really invited everyone just to be mindful of their posture. And then I intentionally asked everybody now to really just open your chest and open your upper body, because there's so many people were sitting with their shoulders hunched down and their back a little bit curved. And this is also the modern sickness of being on the computer so much. But we lose this relationship to our own body, so this practice of being with pain, being with the body, it's such a support to our well-being. So step number 6,
Hey.
keep with the practice of deep looking, is start to inquire, investigate, where are you coming from? Which then leads to step number 7, is letting go of the story. I like this one, because when we suffer, we hold on to one version of the story. And even if our version can be almost correct, but yesterday has passed already. We're in a new space. We're in a new moment in this life. Can we also allow ourselves to be a new person today? Allow also the story to be reflected and to really check, are we sure? Is this story correct? And even if it's right, does it offer happiness? And I know part of my practice in beginning anew is sometimes being right is not the best. And being right may be a big source of deep suffering. And the Buddha's main guidance to us is to help relieve suffering. So in a story, we can also check, is this story leading to healing? And I think this element here, the story part, is such a big investigation for all of us, because like I shared, we may identify with that story and we don't want to let go of that story. And our teacher explains that each and every one of us, we have like a radio station and channels. And so particular suffering becomes a channel that we like to replay again and again and again. Right? Tai said, like, if you've been, and I've been slapped before. So I've been smacked in the face before. And if I don't transform this, and if I don't let it go, every time I'm in a blues, I remember that it's like I'm being slapped again. So it's also like, what are the new stories that you have today?
So, brother, that is so critical, because just the fact that we call it a story means it's a story. It's like, is it a fact or is it a story? And we are natural storytellers. And what you say is so important, because, I have seen in my life that I've had a particular stories, and the way it works and I see it with other people, is that when you have a story, what you're doing is automatically, when anything happens, you're always unconsciously looking for evidence to show your story is true. And even when there's lots of evidence that it's not true, we sort of ignore that and we just choose the little bit of evidence that supports that. So I give the example. I remember I was taught when I was at The Guardian, one of management consultant said, someone can start as the new boss in the office. And they walk into the office and one of the journalists has their feet up on the table and is leaning back and is just sort of sitting there. And the boss may form an instant opinion that that person is lazy and is just sort of not working hard. And that thought, if they then see the other person working really hard, but on occasion putting their feet up, they will more than likely say, oh, look, they've got their feet up again. And we are all locked in by our stories and by our habits. And as you say, they're so powerful, but we have the capacity, as you say, to tell a new story. And in a sense, that is not individual only, that's collective. And, there are a lot of people who are talking, who use the language of, in terms of the system we live in and moving beyond, this particular form of capitalism and dealing with climate change and biodiversity loss and inequality, that we need to create a new story. Because if we're living in the old story, then we're just perpetuating it. But if we actually choose a new story and trust in that, then we are building a different future.
And, this practice here, what is really hard for me, and I'm continuing to practice, is also letting go of the story of the people who hurt you. Because I remember one time, there was a particular brother who caused a lot of suffering. He's still a monk today. And in one of the sharing, like with my mentors, my mentor just say, Phap Huu, have you seen this brother as a new person today? Or of that person 2 years ago? And in that moment, I still see that person as 2 years ago. And that was such a wake-up moment for me, like how we also hold on to stories of our community, our loved ones, and we just see them as that person at that story, maybe 2 years ago, 3 months ago, or 50 years ago, and we still hold on to that story. So this letting go of the story is really also the practice of the present moment. Because in this present moment, have we allowed ourselves to see that person as a new person? And have we allowed ourselves to see ourselves as a new person?
So, brother, is it possible to be free of all stories?
Another big question, Jo. We all have stories, and we're made of stories. And the practice here, when we talk about letting go of the story, is to a story that is holding us to a pain, that is becoming the obstacle for us to be free. But we can have stories. We do have stories. We are made of stories. Our present moment will become a story. Our past is a story, and the future will become a new story. But it is to be within the present moment with freedom. We can reflect on the story, but we are free from it. We can look at the future with the insight of the present moment, the creativity, the new aspiration, the new ingredients to create a new story.
And that's true, of course, brother, of positive. Well, it's not to differentiate between stories of suffering or stories of happiness, because as soon as we attach to any of those stories, we box ourselves in and imprison ourselves with those.
Exactly. And this is where sometimes just checking in, is our story supporting us? This way of looking at who we are? Or can we be free from it in order to be in the story that is happening now? And I think this is where it's a very intentional training in order to be in the present moment and to know that each moment is creating a new past. Each moment is creating a new future.
And also, brother, it brings in the subject of forgiveness. I remember reading many years ago an article in the Daily Mail, a newspaper, and it was it was an interview with a mother whose son had been murdered by somebody. And the article was about how she had forgiven the killer. And it was really sort of imprinted in my mind so strongly at the time, because the journalist asked her, how could you forgive? And she said, if I didn't forgive, all I was doing is perpetuating my own pain. So actually, part of forgiveness is actually I'm freeing myself. Because if I don't, he's not suffering extra because I'm in pain and I blame him, but I'm the one who suffers. And I think there's such a powerful thing about, and it's very hard sometimes, depending, of course, on the scale of the hurt. But if we're able to forgive ourselves, first of all, or forgive the other person, then we free everybody.
And this comes to a story that really sticks with me. And Jo, you may have heard it. Tai have shared it a few times. And it was in one of his retreat for war veterans, especially American war veterans. And at the retreat, they had a closing circle. There was one particular war veteran that was just in such despair and had no light in his eyes. And Tai just asked him directly, what are you holding on to? And in that moment, after 6 days of practice, this gentleman was able to share that he's been holding onto a pain and a guilt for so many years, and it's been haunting him. And the story goes that during his time as a soldier in Vietnam, his special force was to go into the villages and identify the guerrilla warfare, the tactics, and then to eliminate the Việt Cộng soldiers there. And one of their ways was to put poison in the food. And they have prepared a few sandwiches, and they put the sandwiches in the village, knowing that everybody's hungry in war. But unfortunately, it was children that saw the sandwich first, and they ate it. And within a few hours, they were gonna pass, and they were witnessing all of this, and they couldn't review themselves, and they couldn't help. And he can hear the agony of the children. And this suffering and this, the voice and the emotions of those children became his. And he's been holding in this pain and this story, and him being a part of the story for so many years. And in that moment when he was able to share, he was also able to cry. And he said he has nightmares, and he's shared with his mother. And his mother said, well, this is the price of war. Sometimes we can't avoid it. But none of that helped him. And in that moment, Tai looked at him and he said, yes, your actions have led to some children being killed. But in this moment, do you know how many children are dying in America? Can you save a child today? Can you save a child tomorrow? You are not able to go back and to save those child in Vietnam. But in this moment, in the present moment, there are so many hungry children. Can you help set up a foundation, set up some kind of action to relieve a suffering of a child today? And in that moment, Tai explained it like his eyes became bright, and he realized that in this present moment, he can have new actions, and he can create a new story, and it can help heal the actions of the past by doing goodness, doing kindness today. And when I heard this story, I intervened with the children's and also with the soldier for how excruciating it must have been to hold all of this. But Thai gave him the key to the present moment, which is in this present moment. Do you know how many children are dying? And can our actions today help relieve suffering of the present moment rather than shooting arrows back to the wound? And this is a very powerful illustration and a powerful truth and a powerful demonstration of how coming home to the present moment and seeing ourselves in the here and now and of not the past, but embracing the past, learning from the past, and then to create a new pathway towards the future.
And brother, what also that speaks to me is that Thai had to forgive first. So what you're talking about is a Vietnam war vet who was fighting the Vietnamese, and Thai obviously came from Vietnam. So the process that Thai had to go through to forgive the American soldiers and forgive that whole situation so that he could then be there for the healing of one of the soldiers who'd been in Vietnam speaks to me very powerfully of when we are able to forgive, that then filters down throughout.
It's very poetic in a way.
So, brother, before we get just to number 8, and I know everyone's going to wait, let's just keep them hanging on. It better be a good one, Brother Phap Huu. Tell us a little bit about Thai and how, there are many situations through his life where he dealt with pain and sadness, and how he handled that, and what you were his personal attendant for 17 years. What did you see in that time that you learned from?
The one thing that I learned is him not reacting with the pain and with the emotions and storm that come. But he knows how to embrace it. He knows how to be with it. And then he knows how to channel it. So a lot of his suffering became poetry. A lot of the despair that he was in and that he was transforming in himself, he channeled it into the present moment and to touch the goodness of life in the very here and now. And this becomes your life jacket, because even within the immense suffering such as war, and there are so many people in the world today are still there in these deep places of war and tragedy, that he was able to still see the miracle of life. That is the ability of not drowning in it. And a part of it is finding activities to cultivate the joy and the happiness. So singing, music was a big part of his community and is a big part of Plum Village today. When you come to Plum Village, why do we sing before walking meditation? We sing before Dharma sharing. Music becomes a big thread. And there was a good friend that came visit us this year, and she was with Thai in the 70s when Thai was in Paris. And she said, Phap Huu, when he couldn't go back to Vietnam, he was so sad, Phap Huu. He was in Paris, but his heart and soul was in Vietnam. And one of the changing of the channels was music. So all the practice songs were in a way the reminder of the beauty of life. Through his own individual practice, he knows how to channel them, whether it is through poetry, whether it is through music, whether it's through writing. journaling, and of course, taking refuge in the earth. He would practice a lot of walking meditation. And this we can see, being applied for not just suffering, but any other emotions that arises that needs to be channeled, rather than just like staying with it and covering yourself under a blanket and going through the motions and letting it like a washing machine, just like just over and over and over again. You have to have the courage to like step up, step out of it, find elements that are here that you can take refuge in. And that's why in monasteries we have a lot of gardens. Start to garden, start to care for a plant. So there are these activities that we can gain in order to be with the pain and to channel the pain.
Thank you, brother. And I think for our listeners, it's important to differentiate that from activities that run away from our pain, because you talked earlier about, people can turn to music, but what you're saying very specifically is that the activities are in the pain. They are aligned with the pain. It's not like I'm going off to listen to any old music. It's actually that the music itself, the pain is in the music, and the music helps to transform the pain. So there are activities that are very directly engaged with what the feelings are.
Exactly. And when I was with him, he was, a very established master. So there were a lot of moments that he did sit in stillness to look deeply and ask, where are you coming from? Where's the suffering coming from? And why is it here?
So brother, number 8.
And number 8.
Better be a big one, brother.
Is allowing the pain to shift. And we have a very clear practice for us physically that is touching the earth. There's it's a very humbling act, and it allows us to know that we are more than this pain, and we're more than this emotion. And just knowing that we are giving permission to ourselves to also let go of this pain. And so a lot of us practice when we are going through deep suffering, and we want to forgive ourselves, we want to forgive others. We take refuge in our ancestors to bear witness for our courage and our aspiration. So it is directly a physical act, but also an act from the mind space of intentions, that we're intentionally letting go, we're intentionally shifting this pain, we're intentionally letting it transform instead of holding on to it. And in this act, there's 5 points that touches the earth, which is our forehead, our 2 arms, and our 2 knees, and our whole body is in a prostration motion. And this motion, it's also like we are returning to the earth. We are practicing seeing that we are a child of this earth. And because this directly helps us transform the self. Because as individuals, we have a self and historical dimension. I am Brother Phap Huu, you are Jo Confino. But in the ultimate dimension, we are also much more than this. And because of the self, we also hold on to pain and suffering. And so when we practice touching the earth, we also open our hands. So they're not, our palms are not facing the earth, but in our tradition, our palms are open to the sky. And this motion is a motion that indicates that I'm not hiding anything, that I have nothing to cover up. This is it. And I am surrendering. I'm letting go. And so this 8th step is also knowing that it's allowing the pain to shift. It's not cutting it off. So this is really important because sometimes we may think that when we have transformed the pain, the suffering is no longer there. But we have to just imagine like our body when we have surgery, when the body heals, there's a scar that is left behind. And so allowing us to also have scars, allowing us to have information and understanding of pain that we have gone through. And it is healing a relationship that it is not bad or good, but it is there, it happened, and it has given us this understanding. And for me, that was very liberating because I also had the perception, like, I practice in order to have no more suffering. And then you think you touch enlightenment. But that is such a wrong view. Actually, I can be so grateful because of the suffering that I went through. And I treasure Plum Village so deeply because it's not my own pain, but it is my teacher's pain that he went through. And so therefore, I don't want to take this for granted. So when we also expand beyond ourselves, we can, be in touch with our ancestors, our spiritual ancestors and genetic. It also offers us a deep gratitude of where we are. So these 7 steps are, these 8 steps are just one way of looking at it. It's not the absolute truth, but it's a pathway that a lot of us, we have used, and it has allowed us to be with it, understand it, and transform it.
Thank you, brother. And one last question I have for you is around time. Because sometimes when I've suffered the most, at the time, I could see no benefit in that suffering. But then over time, I realized that what I went through was sometimes the making of me, or sometimes actually led to a very positive outcome. But at the time, I always say this to people, and they always hate me for it, which is someone's going through pain. I said, well, yes, you are going through pain, but actually in a year's time, it may be true that you will look back on this moment and realize that actually the best thing that happened. And, that can be in work where people may be stuck in work and then something terrible happens, or they're fired and they think their world's collapsing. But actually a year later, they're much happier. They've been released to do something better. Or people have gone through a very painful situation, but it's allowed them to learn what it is that happens when they act in a certain way, and that it can be a great lesson. So I just think it's important to talk about time, and also the fact that it takes time to master this. I mean, you talked about that's why you don't become an instant Zen master. It takes many, many years, because I think it's very easy for people to feel deflated if some pain comes up and they're not able to catch it straight away. They're not able to transform it. They get stuck in the old pattern. And, and I have that sometimes where, I'm not able to catch it straight away. And, but I do find that over time, I'm able to understand it better, to name it, to start to transform it, and to acknowledge and go through some of those steps. So it'd be lovely, just as a final comment, just to talk about, being, the tenderness of understanding time and understanding that there is meaning in everything, and actually we always have choices of how we want to respond to things.
Yes, and what I can share to this is, in the kindness, there's patience, and be patient with oneself, and not to be so enthusiastic in like, all right, 7 days in Plum Village, I'm going to transform all my pain. We have everything in moderation, the middle way, right? And the Buddha has shared that don't become attached to any extremes. That was one of his mistakes before he became enlightened, which was he went into deep asceticism, and he allowed his body to suffer. He allowed himself to suffer so much. And he realized that that is not it. This is not it. This is not the right path. This is not right mindfulness. This is not right spirituality. And it comes back to step number 5 and 6. In the expansion of time, I recognize that when I am indirectly not being with my pain, but I am taking care of my joy, there is a direct transmission and healing also to the pain. And this is sometimes a lot of people, you do not see it. It is almost like physiotherapy. It's like when you have an injured muscle, maybe it's not the moment to focus on that injury, but you build around it. And while you're building the muscles around, there's healing at the same time that is happening to that pain, to that muscle that is suffering. So we have to also identify and to see that don't underestimate the practice of joy and happiness. And I've seen some of my transformation was through my capacity of being with happiness and being able to shift the story and to saying that, yes, this is suffering, but look at this. Look at the blue sky. Look at the community. Look at the children that are here. There's still hope. And so the interrelation between happiness and suffering is always in play together. And just coming back to moderation, like Tai even told us, sometimes we may intentionally invite the suffering to be present for our reflection, but we have to know our limits and we have to know our capacity. And sometimes when it's like, oh, this is too much, you don't feel defeated. You don't feel like you're not good enough. You're just like, I know you're still there. You're not going to go anywhere. You're a part of me. And in this moment, I need to cultivate other elements to make me stronger, to develop that mountain within me, to continue to embrace and to transform the suffering. So this concept of time and this permission to give yourself the path of transformation, like to really give yourself that understanding that this is not a one-off. And the more that you're able to transform one suffering, you have trust, you have faith in your practice, so that when the next time a strong emotion comes up, you know exactly what to do. When a pain comes up, you know exactly how to be with it because you've done it before. And to see that we continue to keep evolving, growing, and understanding being with pain and having the ability to be with pain.
Thank you so much, brother. We have a story of our podcast, which is that you often do a guided meditation at the end. This is not a new story, but a good story. It's a good habit. So if you have the capacity today, brother, it'd be lovely maybe just to do a short meditation. I enjoy this bit because I then realize how bad my posture's been. I'm able to sit upright and open my shoulders and to relax. We've completed another podcast. I didn't screw up completely. How wonderful. And this is the bit where I feel is the fruit of the practice.
And dear friends, dear listeners, dear community, wherever you may be, if you're sitting on a train, on the airplane, on a bus, in a car, if you're in your room, on a couch, on a cushion, on a chair, if you're going for a walk, a jog, you're cleaning your house, wherever you may be, I invite you to just allow yourself to be still. And we can choose to be standing with stillness or sitting with stillness or even laying down if we need to. And just start to feel the weight of our body, taking refuge in the earth. I invite us to be mindful of our in-breath and to feel the in-breath. I invite us to be mindful of our out-breath, to feel the out-breath. As we breathe in, we feel, we name, this is my in-breath. As we breathe out, we know, we name, this is our out-breath. In-breath, out-breath. Even with the sounds around us, we can still stay grounded within our in-breath and out-breath. And as you breathe in, we just become aware of our body. As we breathe out, we release any tension that is there, offering ourselves tenderness, attention, and love. Thank you, body, for supporting me, for being there. Aware body, relaxing body. Breathing in, I feel joy with my in-breath. Breathing out, I am joy in this moment. The joy of breathing, the joy of sitting, the joy of being. How wonderful it is to be a part of this life. In, being, out, joy. Breathing in, I identify a happiness that is present in me. Breathing out, I allow myself to be the energy of happiness. Identifying an element of happiness, being with that happiness. Breathing in, I am aware of a feeling, an emotion that may be painful, may be unpleasant. Breathing out, I smile to it. I am here for you. I guide it with my in-breath and out-breath. Hello, my pain. I am here for you. No, we will not run away. Just breathe with me. Just be with me. Breathing in, I embrace it. I care for it. I am tender towards it. Breathing out, I offer compassion to myself. In caring for the feelings out, compassion, tenderness. Breathing in, I dwell in the present moment. Breathing out, I am here in the present moment, fully. Breathing in, I am more than my emotions and feeling. Breathing out, I am connected to all beings, the earth. Breathing in, more than just one emotion. Breathing out, expansive. Breathing in, I smile, knowing I am not breathing in alone. Breathing out, I feel connected to the community that is breathing together with me. Breathing in, not alone. Breathing out, connection. Thank you, dear friends, for practicing.
Thank you, Brother Phap Huu. And if you enjoyed this episode, please know that there are many more which you can find on all podcast platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And also, if you enjoyed it and want to help others to find it, then please do give us a review. We read them and take note of them. So thank you to those who've already done that.
And you can also find all previous guided meditation in the on-the-go section of the Plum Village app. The podcast is co-produced with Global Optimism and the Plum Village app with support from the Thich Nhat Hanh Foundation. If you feel inspired to support the podcast moving forward, please go and visit our website, www.tnhf.org/donate. And we would like to offer our gratitude to our friends and collaborators, Kata, Clay, our co-producer, our other Jo, our audio editing, Anka, our show notes and publishing, Jasmine and Cindy, our social media guardian angels, and today Brother Nim Tung on sound. And we also have Georgine, who will be supporting with this sound engineering. And we have a wonderful presence, and that is Paz supporting us today, listening throughout the episode. Thank you, everyone.
The way out is in.